Arrived at the foot of the hill, I walked along the bank of the canal to the west. Presently I came to a barge lying by the bank. The boatman was in it. I entered into conversation with him. He told me that the canal and its branches extended over a great part of England, that the boats carried slates, that he had frequently gone as far as Paddington by the canal, that he was generally 3 weeks on the journey, that the boatmen and the families lived in the little cabins aft, that the boatmen were all Welsh, that they could read English but little or no Welsh, that English was a much more easy language to read than Welsh, that they passed by many towns, among them Northampton, and they liked no place so much as Llangollen. I proceeded till I came to a place where some people were putting huge slates into a canal boat. It was near a bridge which crossed the Dee, which was on the left. I stopped and entered into conversation with one who appeared to be the principal man. He told me, amongst other things, that he was a blacksmith from the neighbourhood of Reuben, and that the flags were intended for the flooring of his premises. In the boat was an old bare-headed, bare-armed fellow, who presently joined in the conversation in very broken English. He told me that his name was Joseph Hughes, and that he was a real Welshman, and was proud of being so. He expressed great dislike for the English, who he said were in the habit of making fun of him and ridiculing his language. He said that all the fools that he had known were Englishmen. I told him that all Englishmen were not fools. But the greater part are, said he. Look how they work, said I. Yes, said he, some of them are good at breaking stones for the road, but not more than 1 in 100. There seems to be something of the old Celtic hatred of the Saxon in this old fellow, said I to myself as I walked away. I proceeded till I came to the head of the canal, where the navigation first commences. It is close to a weir over which the Dee falls. Here there is a little floodgate, through which water rushes from an oblong pond or reservoir, fed by water from a corner of the upper part of the weir. On the left or southwest side is a mound of earth fenced with stones, which is the commencement of the bank of the canal. The head of the canal is situated in a very beautiful spot. To the left or south is a lofty hill covered with wood. To the right is a beautiful slope or lawn, on the top of which is a pretty villa, to which you can get by a little wooden bridge over the floodgate of the canal, and indeed forming part of it. Few things are so beautiful in their origin as this canal, which, if known, with its locks and its aqueducts, the grandest of which is the stupendous erection near Stockport, which by the by filled my mind when a boy with wonder, constitutes the grand work of England, and yields to nothing in the world of the kind, with the exception of the great canal of China. Retracing my steps some way, I got upon the bank of the river, and then again proceeded in the direction of the west. I soon came upon a cottage nearly opposite a bridge which led over the river, not the bridge which I had already mentioned, but one much smaller and considerably higher up the valley. The cottage had several dusky outbuildings attached to it, and a paling before it. Leaning over the paling in his shirt sleeves was a dark-faced, short, thick-set man, who saluted me in English. I returned his salutation, stopped, and was soon in conversation with him. I praised the beauty of the river and its banks. He said that both were beautiful and delightful in summer, but not at all in winter, for then the trees and bushes on the banks were stripped of the leaves, and the river was a frightful torrent. He asked me if I had been to the place called the Robber's Leap, as strangers generally went to see it. I inquired where it was. Yonder, he said, pointing to some distance down the river. Why is it called the Robber's Leap? Said I. It is called the Robber's Leap, said he, because a thief pursued by justice once leaped across the river there and escaped. It was an awful leap, and he well deserved to escape after taking it. I told him that I should go and look at it in some future opportunity, and then asked if there were many fish in the river. He said there were plenty of salmon and trout, and that owing to the river being tolerably high, a good many had been caught during the last few days. I asked him who enjoyed the rights of fishing in the river. He said that in these parts the fishing belonged to 2 or 3 proprietors, who either preserved the fishing for themselves, as they best could, by means of keepers, or let out to other people, and that many individuals came not only from England, but from France and Germany, and even Russia, for the purpose of fishing. And the keepers of the proprietors from whom they purchased permission to fish went with them to show them best places and to teach them how to fish. He added that there was a report that the river would shortly be ruth, or free, and open to anyone. I said that it would be a bad thing to fling the river open, as in that event the fish would be killed at all seasons and times, and then eventually all destroyed. He replied that he questioned whether more fish would be taken then than now, and that I must not imagine that the fish were much protected by what was called preserving. That the people to whom the land in the neighbourhood belonged, and those who paid for fishing, did not catch 100th part of the fish which were caught in the river. That the proprietors went with the keepers and perhaps caught 2 or 3 stone of fish, and that strangers went with the keepers whom they paid for teaching them how to fish, and perhaps caught half a dozen fish, and that shortly after the keepers would return and catch on their own account 60 stone of fish from the very spot where the proprietors or strangers had great difficulty in catching 2 or 3 stone or the half a dozen fish, or the poachers would go and catch a yet greater quantity. He added that gentry did not understand how to catch fish, and their attempt to preserve was nonsense. I told him that if the river was flung open, everyone would fish. He said that I was very much mistaken. The hundreds were now poachers, who would then keep at home, mind their proper trades, and would never use line or spear. That folks always longed to do what they were forbidden. And that Shemai would never have crossed the brook provided had he not been told that he should be hanged if he did. That he himself had permission to fish in the river whenever he pleased, but never availed himself of it, though in his young time when he had no leave, he had been an arrant poacher. The manners and way of speaking of this old personage put me very much in mind of those of Morgan, described by Smollett in his immortal novel of Roderick Random. I had more discourse with him. I asked him in what line of business he was, and he told me that he sold coals. From his complexion and the hue of his shirt, I had already concluded that he was in some grimy trade. I then inquired of what religion he was, and received for an answer that he was a Baptist. He thought that both himself and part of his apparel would look all the better for a good immersion. We talked of the war then raging. He said it was between the false prophet and the dragon. I asked him who the dragon was. He said the Turk. I told him that the Pope was far worse than either the Turk or the Russian, that his religion was the vilest idolatry, and they would let no one alone, that it was the Pope who drove his fellow religionists, the Anabaptists, out of the Netherlands. He asked me how long ago that was. Between 200 and 300 years ago, I replied. He asked me the meaning of the word Anabaptist. I told him, whereupon he expressed great admiration for my understanding, and said that he hoped he would see me again. I inquired of him of what place the bridge led. He told me that if I passed over it and ascended a high bank beyond, I should find myself on the road from Llangollen to Corwin, and that if I wanted to go to Llangollen, I must turn to the left. I thanked him, and passing over the bridge and ascending the bank, found myself on a broad road. I turned to the left, and walking briskly In about half an hour, reached our cottage in the northern suburb, where I find my family and dinner awaiting me. For dinner, we had salmon and leg of mutton. The salmon from the Dee, the leg of mutton from the neighbouring Berwyn. The salmon was good enough, but I had eaten better. And here it will not be amiss to say that the best salmon in the world is caught in the Suir, a river that flows past the beautiful town of Clonmel in Ireland. As for the leg of mutton, it was truly wonderful. Nothing so good had I ever tasted in the shape of a leg of mutton. The leg of mutton in Wales beats the leg of mutton of any other country, and I have never tasted a Welsh leg of mutton before. Certainly I shall never forget that first Welsh leg of mutton, which tasted rich but delicate, replete with juices derived from the aromatic herbs of the noble Berwyn, cooked to a turn and weighing just 4 pounds. Let anyone who wishes to eat leg of mutton in perfection go to Wales, but mind you, eat the leg of mutton only. Welsh leg of mutton is superlative, but with the exception of the leg, the mutton of Wales is decidedly inferior to that of many other parts of Britain. Here perhaps, as I have told the reader what we ate for dinner, it will be as well to tell what we drank at dinner. Let him know that with our salmon we drank water, and with our mutton ale, even ale of Llangollen, but not the best ale of Llangollen. It was very fair, but I subsequently drank far better Llangollen ale than that which I drank for our first dinner in the cottage at Llangollen. In the evening, I went across the bridge and strolled along in a south-east direction. Just as I had cleared the suburb, a man joined me from a cottage on the top of a high bank, whom I recognised as the mower with whom I had held discourse in the morning. He saluted me and asked me if I were taking a walk. I told him I was, whereupon he said that if it were not too proud to wish to be seen walking with a poor man like himself, he should wish to join me. I told him I should be glad to be of his company, and that I was not ashamed to be seen walking with any person, however poor, who conducted himself with propriety. He replied that I must be very different from my countrymen in general, who were ashamed to be seen walking with any people who were not at least as well dressed as themselves. I said that my countryfolk in general had a great many admirable qualities, but at the same time a great many foibles, foremost amongst which last was a crazy admiration for what they call gentility, which made them sycophantic to the superiors in station and extremely insolent to those whom they considered below them. He said that I had spoken his very thoughts, and then asked me whether I wished to be taken over the most agreeable walk near Llangollen. On my replying by all means, he led me along the road to the south-east. A pleasant road it proved. On our right at some distance was the mighty Berwyn. Close on our left was the hill called Pennacoed. I asked him what was beyond the Berwyn. A very wild country indeed, he replied, consisting of wood, rock and river, in fact an Anialwch. He then asked if I knew the meaning of Anialwch. A wilderness, I replied. You will find the word in the Welsh Bible. Very true, sir, said he. It was here I met it, but I did not know the meaning of it till it was explained to me by one of our teachers. On my inquiring of what religion he was, he told me he was a Calvinistic Methodist. I passed an ancient building which stood on our right. I turned around to look at it. Its back was to the road. At its eastern end was a fine arched window like the oriel window of a church. "That building," said my companion, "is called Penwern Hall. It was once a convent of nuns, a little time ago a farmhouse, but is now used as a barn and a place of stowage. Till lately it belonged to the Mostyn family, but they disposed of it with the farm on which it stood, together with several other farms, to certain people from Liverpool who now live yonder," pointing to a house a little way further on. I still looked at the edifice. "You seem to admire the old building," said my companion. "I was not admiring it," said I was thinking of the difference between its present and former state. Formerly it was a place devoted to gorgeous idolatry and obscene lust. Now it is a quiet old barn in which hay and straw are placed, and broken tumbles stowed away. Surely the hand of God is visible here." "It is so, sir," said the man in a respectful tone, "and so it is in another place in the neighbourhood. About 3 miles from here, in the northwest part of the valley, is an old edifice. It is now a farmhouse, but was once a splendid abbey, and was called—" "The Abbey of the Vale of the Cross," said I. "I've read a great deal about it. Iolo Goch, the bard of your celebrated hero Owen Glendower, was buried somewhere in its precincts." We went on. My companion took me over a stile behind the house which we had pointed out, and along a path through hazel coppices. After a little time I inquired whether there were any papists in Llangollen. "No," said he, "there is not one of that family in Llangollen, but I believe there are some in Flintshire, at a place called Holywell, where there is a pool or fountain, the waters of which it is said they worship." "And so they do," said I, "true to the old Indian superstition, of which their religion is nothing but a modification. The Indians and sepoys worship stocks and stones and the river Ganges, and our papists worship stocks and stones, holy wells and fountains." We soon came to a road leading east and west. "This way," said he, pointing in the direction of the west, "leads back to Llangollen, the other to Offa's Dyke and England." We turned to the west. He inquired whether I have ever heard before of Offa's Dyke. "Oh yes," said I, "it was built by the old Saxon king called Offa against incursions of the Welsh." "There was a time," said my companion, "when it was customary for the English to cut off the ears of every Welshman who was found to the east of the dyke, and for the Welsh to hang every Englishman whom they found to the west of it. Let us be thankful that we are now more humane to each other. We are now on the north side of Pennacoed. Do you know the meaning of Pennacoed, sir?" "Pennacoed," said I, "means the head of the wood. I suppose that in the old time the mountain looked over some extensive forest, even as the nunnery of Penguern looked originally over an alder swamp, for Penguern means the head of the alder swamp." "So it does, sir. I shouldn't wonder if you could tell me the real meaning of a word which I have thought about a good deal, and which I was puzzling in my head last night as I lay in bed." "What may it be?" said I. "Carn Laiuda," he replied. "Now, sir, do you know the meaning of that word?" "I think I do," said I. "What may it be, sir?" "First let me hear what you conceive its meaning to be," said I. Well, sir, I should say that Carn Laiuda is an out-and-out thief, one worse than a thief of the common sort. Now, if I steal a mattress, I am a liadra, that is, a thief of the common sort. But if I carry it to a person and he buys it, knowing that it be stolen, I conceive it to be he is far worse than the thief than I. In fact, a Carn Laiuda. "The word is a double word," said I, compounded of Carn and Laiuda. The original meaning of Carn is a heap of stones, and Carn Laiuda means properly a thief without house or home, and with no place on which to rest his head save the cairn or heap of stones on the bleak top of the mountain. In course of time, however, the original meaning was lost or disregarded, and the term Khan Laithua was applied to any particularly dishonest person. At present, there can be no impropriety in calling a person who receives a mattress knowing to be stolen a Khan Laithua, seeing that he is worse than the thief who stole it, and in calling a knavish attorney a Khan Laithudaya, seeing that he does far more harm than a common pickpocket. Or in calling the Pope so, seeing that he gets huge sums of money out of people by pretending to be able to admit their souls to heaven or hurl them to the other place, knowing all the time that he has no such power. Perhaps indeed at the present day the term Khan Laithudaya is more applicable to the Pope than anyone else, for he is certainly the arch thief of the world. But I must tell you that the term Khan may be applied to anyone who is particularly bad or disagreeable in any respect. And now I remember has been applied for centuries both in prose and poetry. One Lewis Glencothi, a poet who lived more than 300 years ago, used the word Khan in the sense of a rant or exceedingly bad, for in his abusive ode to the town of Chester, he says that the women of London itself were never more Khan strumpets than those of Chester, by which he means that there were never more arrant harlots in the world than those in the cheese capital. And the last of your great poets, Gronwy Owen, who flourished about the middle of the last century, complains in a letter to a friend while living in a village of Lancashire that he was among Khan Saison. He found all English disagreeable enough, but those of Lancashire particularly so. Savage, brutal louts, out-and-out John Bulls, and therefore he called them Khan Saison. "Thank you, sir," said my companion. "I am now thoroughly understanding the meaning of Khan. Whenever I go to Chester and a dressed-up madam jostles against me, I shall call her Khan Bhutan. The Pope of Rome I shall call in future term Khan Laithudaya Ibith, or the arch thief of the world. And whenever I see a stupid, brutal Englishman swagging around Llangollen and looking down upon us poor Welsh, I shall say to myself, 'Get home, you Khan Sais.' Well, sir, we are now near Llangollen. I must turn to the left, you go straight forward. I never had such an agreeable walk in my life. May I ask your name?" I told him my name and asked him his. "Edward Jones," he replied. On the following morning I strolled up the Berwyn on the south-west of the town by a broad winding path, which at first was very steep, but by degrees became less so. I imagined that from the top I would have a glorious view of the Vale of Llangollen. The view, however, did not answer my expectations. I returned to Llangollen by nearly the same way which I had come. The remainder of the day I spent entirely with my family, whom, at their particular request, I took in the evening to see Plas Newydd, once the villa of the two ladies of Llangollen. It lies on the farther side of the bridge, at a little distance from the back part of the church. There is a thoroughfare through the grounds, which are not extensive. Plas Newydd, or the New Place, is a small gloomy mansion with a curious dairy on the right-hand side, as you go up to it, and a remarkable stone pump. An old man who we met in the grounds, and with whom I entered into conversation, said that he remembered the building of the house, and that the place where it now stands was called, before its erection, Penamais, or the head of the field.